What's going on, Mitch?
Not much, buddy. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, man. I'm doing well.
Good. Good. It's good to see you guys.
Nice seeing you. I know this has been going on for about 5 years, but how long have you been keeping it up monthly, even through coronavirus?
Yep. Yeah. So we just moved to a virtual basis in March. That was kind of the transition, right? So March, April, and now May. So this is the first time we're using Zoom. So there's a little barrier to entry on Zoom versus Uber Conference, but it does allow some better tracking as well, some better control on the interface side of things. So
you're all set up there, man. It looks like you've got you're sitting in a podcast studio there.
Right? Yeah, this is actually our conference room. So we moved down to a new office. So yeah, it's good. Still a little like noisy, echoey and stuff, but
look like the next Joe Rogan.
Yes. Rogan just signed a huge deal with Spotify to be exclusive to Spotify, I saw.
I think he's like the highest paid talk show guy now.
Yeah, I think it was 100 million.
Wow.
Brad.
Good for him.
I'm assuming that's Brad, right?
Yeah, Ben, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Doing well.
We've spoken on the phone a few times, but never seen face to face or as close as we can get here. So nice to meet you finally.
You're lucky to not had to see me face to face, but it had to happen sometime.
So I expect usually the first 15, 20 minutes people trickle in, and then around 5:20 or so, we usually have a decent turnout on the line. One of the challenges is always the work schedule for folks, especially inside of this group. So we kind of take it slow on the intro side of things.
All good, man.
So it looks like we got Matt on the line. How you doing, Matt?
I'm good, thanks. How you doing?
Can't complain, buddy. First time calling into one of these? I don't recognize you, bud.
Yeah, I think you guys had a meeting in West Des Moines I went to.
Oh, okay. Yep.
At a restaurant lounge in the back.
Absolutely. Yeah, wobbly booths. So that makes sense.
Yeah, I was there.
Perfect.
Are you from the Des Moines area, Matt?
Yeah, I grew up around here. I went to Johnston K through 12.
Very good. Are you looking to get into investment properties? Already into investment properties? What's going on there?
Well, I have a mentor who has a lot of real estate. He has some really good real estate deals. He's got business in other countries, so he has some big investments that he's talked about and stuff like that. But one of them he has is really good. It sounds like in Texas, he has a teacher who rents one of his properties, for like the past 20 or 30 years, she's rented. So she's always been able to pay the rent and everything.
That's not a bad deal. It probably means that she's a little under market, but it's not bad to have a long-term tenant.
Hey guys. Hi. Hey Sam.
Hey Samantha, how are you? I thought I recognized you.
Yeah, I'm doing good. Hey, I sent a client your way.
You did?
I did. Shanice, is that ringing a bell?
Shanice.
She probably would have called yesterday.
Today or yesterday was a busy day, so I'm sure I talked to her, but the name is escaping me. Shanice. I'm writing it down to make sure I heard from her. My voicemail's empty for the first time in a while, so.
Awesome.
So the way that we'll run this, guys, just so everyone that's joining the call, we'll take questions and answers as we go. So if you have a question, just kind of raise hand or drop it in chat. We've got some folks on the back end here that are running that. So as soon as we get to kind of a pause in that conversation, we'll get that question spoke out loud. You can either say it, we'll unmute you to do that, or we can recite it if you don't want to talk. So as we go through, I will try to spotlight, so it'll come up on your screen if we get too many callers in here with whoever's speaking. It's kind of weird, so bear with me through this, guys. It's kind of new doing the whole Zoom thing. So
If you wouldn't have told me that it was your first time, I would have thought it was 100.
see, let the cat out of the bag. I should say first time hosting a Zoom call. It was Uber conference last month and the month before. So unfortunately, this has been part of life recently, hence the mic, right? Probably we are close to 100 on Zoom calls at this point. And you will, I've got my daughter in the room too. So if you hear a baby laughing, it's nothing weird. It's just our kiddo.
Is that the one who was watching you do push-ups the other day?
Yeah, so I've got two kiddos. I got a daughter who's almost a year and then a daughter who's almost 3. So yeah, that was she was cheering me on. We had a push-up competition in one of the masterminds. So we'll see. 675. I'm like, that's a personal record. Don't get me wrong, guys. It was like 33 sets. So I broke that out all day long. That was not at once. Bite-sized elephant.
The only way to be able to do that many.
What was that, Darson?
I said that's the only way to be able to do that many.
Right. Yeah. So let's go ahead and get started. We'll just do a slow intro. Sam's prepared some market data coming into this, kind of like we did last month. Sam, would you mind sharing those stats?
Yeah, no problem. So what we pulled information from is the Des Moines Area Association of Realtors multiple listing site. So we compared March and April. Couldn't really grab May's numbers because we're still in May. So in March, and we were comparing 2019 to 2020. So in March of 2019, we took 1,625 new listings. And then in March of 2020, there was 2,157 new listings. So a pretty significant jump when we compare our 2019 to 2020 March listings. And then we're kind of flip-flopped when it came to April. So in 2019, we had 2,398 new listings. In April of 2020, we had 1,824.
Wow, that's a big drop there.
Big drop, definitely. And then our average days on market from the day that it was listed to the day that it closed. And I always like to remind people that it typically takes 45 days once the property is under contract to get it officially closed. So in March of 2019, our average days on market was 82 days. In March of 2020, our average days on market was 84. In April of 2019, average days on market was 79 days. And in April of 2020, we remained steady at that 84.
Okay, so at the average level, slight increase, but probably not a big deal overall in the days on market. So that's good to see kind of the comparison. Less listings, still consistently selling. So there's still a buyer demand out there.
Absolutely. And I'm almost wondering if COVID had a bit to do with those, days on market kind of remaining the same. It was hard to get appraisers in.
Yeah, for sure. I know we ran into that in several projects from the delay, just the change on the appraisal. So doing the virtual appraisals versus physical walkthroughs. That was kind of a weird step through there.
Yeah, I would say that for the most part, we had to get really creative.
Yeah, for sure. Perfect.
Let's see. So then the next report that I ran was our list price by square footage and close price versus our original price ratio. So what we're looking at is what is the average price per square foot? So in 2019, and we're looking at January through May, in 2020, our average price per square foot remained pretty much between $163 to $165 per square foot. And then our close price to original price ratio, we really hovered in that 97 to 98% range, which is really good. As an agent, I like to see that. It's letting us know that, you know, we're coming in at our list prices pretty close to what people are offering on them. So
Yeah.
that's always good to see those numbers.
For sure. Awesome. So what we'll do, those are all the reports, right, Sam?
Yep, all in a report. So we can definitely throw those out whichever
Yep.
way is easiest.
Okay, we'll drop a link for those reports, guys, just so you can see the raw data on there and the graphs for them. They'll also be posted in the minutes following this, just so everyone's aware this is all being recorded. So if there's something that comes up that you're like, hey, I really want to double check that, it's actively being recorded and will be uploaded on like the very first one we did. So it'll come through this time. Awesome. Well, it looks like we've got a decent amount of folks on the line now. So let's go ahead and do introductions. We've got two guest speakers tonight, both experts in the property management world in the Des Moines metro area. So I'm looking forward to chatting with you guys, kind of getting that feel from your perspective. If you wouldn't mind, Ben, would you mind introducing yourself first, buddy?
Yeah, of course. Appreciate the invite tonight. Been a while since I've done anything like this, so going to be good conversation, I think, for a couple hours or as long as we go here. So just a brief introduction on who I am. I've been doing property management for about 10 years. Started touch-up paint, re-rolling, cleaning toilets, that basic thing, and then kind of grew up in a mom-and-pop company here locally. And then took over real property management about 3 years ago, and geared us in a direction that we're headed here now. So we specialize in single family homes, condos, townhomes, and duplexes, specifically in the western side and then north of the interstate for the most part. So west of 30th Street is usually the line that I draw for people, north of the interstate all the way up to Ames. We're kind of a niche of our niche. We focus on properties that rent between about $1,500 and $3,000 a month, a little bit north of that on a couple of whales, but for the most part in that sweet spot. So we manage about 400 properties in that area from Waukee up to Ames. We kind of view things a little bit differently in our select group of investors because we're not about adding every door. We're adding about the doors that kind of fit our business model. We view being an investor as different than being a landlord. So kind of going down the wealth builder idea, create, build, and maximize, rather than going into it with, we just go about it and target our market just a little bit different. So that's just a little bit about our company and myself, and happy to answer any questions as we roll.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. And we've also got Brad Neal on the line. Brad, would you mind doing a self-introduction, buddy?
You bet. Thanks, Mitch. Just like Ben said, appreciate you inviting me along here, and hopefully I don't have any technology issues on my side. It's not a strong suit for me, but so I own and operate Renters Warehouse, Iowa. We have been in business for about 5.5 years now in central Iowa. And I've owned it myself that entire time. Prior to that, I am still, but was a licensed and practicing attorney for 10 years, 5 years of that in Cedar Rapids, Iowa City area, so Eastern Iowa, and then the last 5 years prior to starting Renter's Warehouse, I was here in West Des Moines. Then in January of 2015, I started Renter's Warehouse here. Renter's Warehouse is a franchise that started in Minneapolis, focusing on single-family rental properties. I was at the time looking for management options for rental properties that my then girlfriend and I own. She's now, for better or for worse, on her side, she's now my wife. So I was kind of looking around and recognized that there might be some opportunity there. And so I started thinking about maybe starting another business in addition to law practice. Discovered Renter's Warehouse and then tried to find a reason not to do it. I could certainly give myself a lot of those reasons now. I didn't discover those reasons then. So I took off and realized very quickly that it's not something that happens on the side or that you can do on the side. Many of the same realizations that I suspect a lot of the folks on this call, they realize on a daily basis that it starts to be hard at 4 or 5 or 6 rentals to start manage their own and still have a full-time gig and not pull their hair out. So I realized that very quickly, and we started with 0 properties. We now manage about 850, 860 units in Des Moines. We cover all of Des Moines and all of the burbs. We go out to about, we have some properties in Perry and Newton and Indianola. We have maybe 20 some units in Boone. So yeah, we try to stick to this central Iowa area. Really like, anything we can get to within about 35, 40 minutes drive. And our focus is really the mentality of the investor, of the landlord that we're going to be partnering with. We really like to partner with folks who have the right mindset, recognize that tenants are assets. They may not have the prettiest house on the block, but their intention is to have a good, clean, competent property that'll be a good home for someone. And we try to help them achieve that goal and recognize that tenants can be assets and recognize that there are obligations on both sides of the fence with regard to tenants and landlords. And we do our best to step in and manage that and not frustrate too many people at the same time. So.
Perfect. Thanks for that intro, guys. So it sounds like you both have a pretty sizable portfolio, very different niches. So if I'm hearing you right, Brad, you'll take anything that meets the kind of investor mentality in the metro area, all the way north up the Boone, all the way southbound to Indianola. Whereas Ben, you're more on the west to east, going up northbound on the suburbs is your guys' preference, and really focusing on that higher end rental. Did I get that summary right, guys?
I think you pegged it.
Awesome. So kind of digging into the questions here, with COVID going on, we've seen a lot of different scares, right? So a lot of media hype about what's happening on the East Coast, West Coast, as far as rent collections. What are you guys seeing? How's that looking?
You want me to go, Brad?
It doesn't matter, buddy. I just don't want to step on all over each other each time we try to talk. So.
No, you're good. So it's been a roller coaster. It's been a wild ride the last 90 days. Started in March with kind of this unknown feeling, right? Like everything was changing so fast. We started changing our processes and systems very, very quickly in the beginning of March, like the first week in March, before a lot of decisions were even made. So it was hard to really know what to expect and what to guide. It was more of just being transparent and getting as much information out to folks as possible, reliable information, that was, a decent source to come from. So we felt kind of a process here. March was a kind of a panic month, not necessarily for us, but for the market and for tenants and owners. And then April was more of like a preparing and an understanding month, where there was a lot of talking through stuff, figuring out what options were in worst case scenarios. And then obviously with evictions, what can and can't you do? Those questions were asked commonly. And then May so far has been I'm ready, almost, it feels kind of like that's what the general population is getting to, of just like, I'm ready for whatever happens next, and let's just move on to the next stage of this thing. And that's kind of the mindset that we feel our residents and our owners are. In our market, we're just a little bit less affected just because our average rents are about $1,700. So we're still kind of in the white collar demographic for the most part. So haven't been hit nearly as hard as I would suspect a lot of other folks are, but still hit. A hit's a hit. It doesn't matter how big.
Absolutely. So inside of that, can you ballpark percentage of collections outside of normal, right? So I don't know what your normal collection ratios are compared to kind of what you saw in March, April, May.
March, we didn't actually see anything because rents, it kind of hit at an okay time in March because they all already came in. So we were at about a 99% collection rate, which is pretty normal for us each month. And then April ended at 92%, but it took the whole month. It was a lot of payment plans, a lot of working through stuff. And then May is on the same trajectory as April so far. I think we're at like 87% as of this morning. So expecting to get close to that 92% collection rate. And the other 8% or 7% that we don't collect, communication is there. That's the big thing that we felt was kind of the differential, somebody we wanted to work with and somebody that obviously was on our short list. So communication was really important. Even if they didn't pay, they at least communicated.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Brad, totally different demographic. How are you seeing that come through, buddy?
Yeah, Ben kind of hit the nail on the head with regard to kind of the feeling in March, April, and May. I'm going to date myself here. I would compare it to the movie, The Blair Witch Project. When I first heard about that movie, everybody was telling you it was like the scariest thing you've ever seen, and be ready to, if you go to the theater, like you're almost going to die when you watch it and all of that. And I was a little panicked. A lot of my company's income is based on, we don't collect our income if we don't collect rent. There's nothing to pay ourselves with, right? So so I was looking at it going, holy crap, are we going to get 70% collection in these months and all of a sudden take a 25 or a 30% hit on our income and things like that. March, again, like Ben said, it hit after the fact. And so we were pretty good in March, and I guess to carry the Blair Witch theme through this, it ended up not being nearly as scary, at least to this point, as I thought it was going to be. I remember the movie. I was like, it's kind of scary. This hasn't been near as bad as I first expected. We've gotten to about the 90%, about 90% of rents collected as of the 10th of April and May each month. Right around the 15th, 16th, 17th, we've been getting close to that 94, 95. And as we get to about this point in each month, we've gotten to about that 97, 98 range. Payment plans, different ideas in place for the balance of those. I think we closed last month at right about 98, and I expect to close this month at
Nice. From the renter's warehouse side, did you guys provide any incentives to tenants to make payments, or was it just an offset on the late fee side?
Well, yeah, so we actually had that in place. I feel like the federal government stole my thunder there. I was going to be this very gracious and gentle management person because we keep the late fees. We do. My company keeps the late fees. We do all the work associated with a late paying tenant. And very candidly, I'd rather we had zero late paying tenants, even though we make a little bit of money off of it. So I was going to waive all late fees for the next 3 months, and then it came out on most properties that have any federal backing on their financing. Obviously, that we had to do that for 4 months. So we've done that. We've gotten very, as Ben kind of indicated, a lot more open-minded with regard to payment plans, thinking outside the box. Before April started, so maybe around the 25th of March, kind of when a lot of this was happening, like when the CARES Act was signed on the 27th of March. My staff and I got together, myself and I should say my collections department, and I drafted maybe 4 general framework kind of payment plan ideas that we wanted to kind of filter all of those through one of those different frameworks, because there is always an overriding concern with regard to disparate treatment of individuals, of tenants, so on and so forth. So we kind of wanted to show that, be able to show at a later date that all of our payment plans were falling into one of these categories and one of these general structures, because somebody's always ready to say that they were treated differently or something like that. So we wanted to make sure we weren't exposing our owners to that prospective liability, and really, and we've had really good fortune with it. We've had some owners, Mitch, reach out and say, hey, you know, for these months, let's cut rent by 30% or 50% or 10%, or you know, different formats that they propose on their own. And if we're not hearing from them in that respect, then we're making some pretty aggressive proposals on our own. And of course, it's easy to make those proposals at this point in time, because if they do have a federally backed mortgage on their property, the alternative is not at all attractive right now. So right now, if we've got a poor performing tenant because of whatever reason, let's get aggressive with that payment plan and try and keep that number as small as possible, so that when we come out the other side of this in August with regard to the CARES Act, that number's maybe manageable at that point in time.
That makes sense. Back to Ben, did you guys have any incentives to try to encourage collection?
Yeah, we're, like Brad said, we're a company that only gets paid when our investors get paid. So kind of a worry of what was going to happen with rents that came in. We were pleasantly surprised, obviously, at how many rents ended up coming in. So we did offer some incentives. We were actually really, really surprised, pleasantly surprised, owners calling in, or as we were talking and reaching out and talking through options, saying, hey, let me do this to these guys. And they understood the position that we were in as a company as well, because obviously they know that our service would drop if our income came in, or dropped, because we can't afford to keep everybody. And so they were actually in the position where they wanted to say, I'll still pay my full management fee and I'll offer this. And so we always worked with them in finding a balance in that of, you know, what's too much to offer, because this might go on for a long time. So we give too much up in month 1 or month 2, then month 3, you got to do full, and just can get hard. So kind of spread them out. And then on the owner side, or on our client side, how we help the most possible was on the maintenance. You know, we call it a maintenance debt. You know, there's this giant amount of maintenance that hasn't been able to been performed because of COVID-19. And so what we've done with our owners in the sense of helping is saying, all right, here's the plan. Here's how we've delegated what's urgent, what can wait. And then here's how we're going to help you, because we know there's going to be a big expense when this is all done, of getting all this maintenance wrapped up. So spreading that out, or doing it at cost, you know, so there's no margin in there. Because as much as investors have a mindset that property managers, I feel like, to make money off maintenance, it's not necessarily where we make our money. You know, we make our money on management fees. If I never got a maintenance request, I could let 3 people go and still have the same income. So yeah, maintenance is one of those necessary evils in order to do a great job for investors. So our incentives mainly came on the owner side with maintenance, and then with tenants, it was doing everything we could to communicate and help put resources out in front of them so they could find the money where it was. I mean, we saw money from churches, and I mean, just all kinds of unique places that I didn't expect people to have opportunities to get. to get money
sure.
from.
Hey, Ben and
Yeah.
Brad, this is Darson. I got a question. What are you guys going to change in your business model what has changed due to this? Have you guys have changed any practices or anything like that? Do you care to share?
Yeah, I'll give you a quick one. We've found efficiencies in this where you just don't expect that you have those efficiencies until you're forced into those efficiencies. And now it's like, well, we can do this whole thing differently and do some of these things at a much higher level because we were just too scared to do it before. And we liked the way we were doing it because we were comfortable in it. So there's
What are you
definitely
thinking,
some things.
like virtual stuff? Give me something tangible.
Absolutely. So move-ins, for example, had to be forced to be virtual move-ins, where the property's prepped and ready to go. And then we have an electronic lockbox with a temporary code for them to be able to access. And then we come through the property and we deliver some stuff after the fact, after they've taken possession of the home, welcome baskets, these in-person connections and that we typically build when we're showing the property and doing the lease signing and all this stuff. We aren't able to do that anymore. So just recreating how that move-in process actually happens. And then, I mean, in conjunction with that, lease signings, we've always been huge advocates for in-person lease signings to set expectations. Of course, we do everything electronic, but we'd like to get the person in front of us. In our clientele, we feel it's a little bit, it's important to get in front of them and help them know who we are when they have a maintenance request. So on the leasing side of things, getting everything 100% fully electronic and then not wavering on that, making everybody go through that, and then doing these type of calls, these Zoom calls with them, meeting them face to face. Also, onboarding new clients has been totally different. Done way too many Zoom calls or Google Hangouts or, Ring Central Meets where you're meeting you could be 2 miles from the person, but you're talking through them on the video call. So that's something I'll probably stick with just for efficiency's point. But of course, I love getting through properties, and we want to walk every property that we manage. So at some point we'll walk through it, but it won't be like the first step like it usually was in the past.
But Brad, any virtual changes or any efficiency adjustments?
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the same ones that Ben mentioned, virtual marketing, showings. We made some changes that I think once the social distancing aspect goes away, of course, I think those will as well, because I think, for example, we meet folks, if we are showing them in person, we meet them in the front yard. We don't go in with them. They go in, they come out, we go back in, we wipe everything down, we sanitize everything and get it ready for the next person. I hope that we're going to get to a place in time where we don't have to do that. We've actually, we've locked our front door at our office, and we're appointment only now. And it's, Mitch, I see you smiling. Have you done something similar?
Yeah, we did the same thing. It's it's a buzz-in system. There's a big stop sign that says, "Give us a call, set an appointment, or drop the payment through the door." Like there's.
And I set it up so 120 volts are running through the front door handle. But it's, I mean, my staff's been working mostly remotely, but I have every day we have one staff member in here who's here for the first half of the day just to make sure we can get keys in the right hands for vendors and so on and so forth. But that locked front door, we're keeping that 100%. And I would tell you too, it seems to me like I don't like to say this, I own the building in which our office is located. I think more of my employees can be location neutral than are currently. I'm still a little bit old school in that respect, and like to get everybody in the same place to have commonality of purpose and ideas and things like that. But and I will deny having said that part of it. So.
For sure. So we're very similar in the building. So we own the building that we're in as well. It's multi-tenant building at this point. We had moved off our Douglas location. Even down in Douglas, though, we kept the door locked 24/7. Buzzing system there, buzzing system here. It's been a huge efficiency for us because those after hour walk-in appointments. Hey, my fridge isn't working at 5:30. Like, what? Just call us. Like, we'll get someone down there. You don't have to stop in. It's cut down that substantially. So we are not in the property management business. Let me make that clear. So at this point, like, we've stepped out of managing third-party pieces for other people. So just for everyone on the call, we do not do that for others anymore. But we've got about 200 properties under our management umbrella presently, or 200 doors, not properties. So a couple of things that we did from an incentive basis for any Calusi-owned assets, we just took $50 off universally across the board if paid by due date or paid by grace period end. So all of our stuff's due by the 5th, late on the 6th. Obviously, we waive late fees. We did that in April alone, had a 100% collection rate inside of that. I shouldn't say 100%. It wasn't all in by the 6th, but it was all in by end of month. We did not carry that credit over to May, and I'm happy to report we're at 100% collection in May as well. So that little bump, and our demographic is a lot more similar to, I'd say, Brad's kind of stuff. So we've got a little bit of everything, not a lot of high end, couple in there. But our collection ratio extended into our contract sales, that kind of stuff too. So it was it's good to hear the different perspectives and kind of see what's happening. What about lease up timeframes, guys? Have you seen any shift on that, Brad?
So it's been, that part's actually, I should have mentioned that earlier, Mitch, but that part has shocked me because we've seen, properties have been we've been getting a ton of attention. Properties been getting placed, high quality applicants. I kind of feared that it's been my experience that when something, obviously we've never had anything like COVID-19, but when there's uncertainty in the marketplace, people tend to sit on their hands and stand pat and wait before any big decisions are made. And, they don't go out and buy a car. They don't go out and buy a house. They don't go out and move from one rental to another, whatever the case may be. So I kind of thought we would see almost a similar market to like what we see in November, December, January, where we've got a lot of tenants who are moving, but the ones who are moving are not necessarily the ones who control their own fate. And so we see a diminishment a little bit in the quality of applicants at properties, and therefore we see maybe a similar or a slightly depressed number of applicants, but even fewer placements, not a direct correlation between those two. Fewer placements still because the quality of tenants has diminished. I thought that's what we were in for, in April and this far in May. It hasn't been that case. We've been seeing good applicants, good people looking for properties, and we've probably placed 65, maybe 70 tenants over the last 5.5, 6 weeks.
Wow, that's awesome.
So I would normally expect maybe 10% more than that this time of year.
Okay.
So really, I've been pretty pleased with that. Been pretty surprised by that. I thought we were going to really see some crickets there, and I was going to have a hard time keeping agents busy and things like that. So
yeah, that's awesome. Ben, what about your side? I know totally different demographic in there. How's that looking on your end?
Yeah, I'm going to echo what Brad said. Before I do that, I just wanted to mention, because Brad mentioned it earlier and I forgot to mention it, we're a franchise as well. And so like Brad, we're probably, as Brad probably exposed to this as well, we're data is pushed down from the total franchises, right? Like as a whole. And I just had some information come, like they break it out for us into like regions. You got like the Heartland region, kind of the Midwest area, and then you've got the coast. And average across the board for these property management groups, there are these companies, their unit counts were between like 300 and 500, somewhere in between there. So pretty similar to us. Their average rents were a little bit lower, but their collection was a lot like what you guys are reporting. It was like 95, 96% across the board. And everybody was expecting, obviously, this big thing. So it's not just us here locally, as far as what I'm seeing, experiencing the better payment record than what we were expecting. I think it's, at least in the Midwest, it seems like everybody's doing all right.
For sure.
On the leasing side, though, again, echoing what Brad said, yeah, it's been it's busy. Like, set a record number of applications 2 weeks ago. I mean, like 50 in a week. I mean, just huge numbers. And I will say that our application quality has dropped a little bit, but it makes sense because the demographic that we're at, we're just getting, there's more eyeballs out there now because people are sitting at home on their computer and they have time to be inquiring and put applications in and do these different things. So we're just seeing almost like a new crowd of applications come in on kind of the bottom side. So looking to pick the best of the bunch on the bottom side. But yeah, it's been still great quality applications coming through, moving quickly. Most of these folks want to move in within 14 to 21 days. I mean, they're not,
Awesome.
60 days, 90 days out. They're moving. And I
That's great.
thought exactly what Brad was going to say. Things were going to slow down and get really tight for a while. People were just going to save their money. Heck no, they're moving. They're ready to go. So yeah, it's been great on the leasing side. And I'm not sure if this is a sweeping thing, but we immediately adopted 3D tours of our properties. So, I mean, and we can see how many people are looking at these things, and it's like, holy smokes, people are viewing. They're
Are you
looking.
guys using the Matterport or a different?
Yeah, we're using Matterport.
Okay.
Yep, and we've got a couple cameras running around. Seems like constantly you're doing 5 a day.
Yeah. The Matterports have been a big change for us. So we've been using those for a couple of years now. We got them for the rehab side of things and moved them into property management. For anyone that doesn't know, that's kind of like a Google Maps inside your house. So you can literally navigate on the floor circles. You can annotate. So special features inside of the house, you can tag all of those things. It's fantastic from the lease up side. And it's also really good where we found a benefit in that was if we do it before and after a tenant moves out, we can document to the T on what they did or didn't do. So it's really good for that as well. We had a question come in from Jose. Jose asked, have you guys had any leases end through this period? I'm sure you have. And if so, was it difficult to do the changeover and refill that unit?
No, not for us. I'm sure Brad would probably echo this, with the amount of people looking, we wanted to turn them quick. I mean, we try to turn everything within 7 days anyway. So, I mean, sometimes we were down to, crunch time, just a couple days between people moving in and moving out to get carpet cleaned, get the right stuff done in between. But no, we've actually had a more of a demand on pushing that faster than pushing it back.
Awesome.
Just because I'm a little new to this process, can you walk me through that? Like, what an applicant means? Are they applying for a certain property, or are they just applying to look at one of your properties? Or just take it from the ground level for me.
Yeah, good question. So usually about 70% of our leads come from 4 sites: Zumper, Hot Pads, Trillia, and Zillow. Those 4 are our big 4. And so it usually starts with an inquiry. They put in about a property. And then once they inquire, our team talks to them and shows them or gets them a virtual link or whatever. And then after they like it, they'll put an application in. And that application asks for, it's a pretty detailed application, but we try to keep it low entry as far as just getting them in the door. So it asks for their basic information, contact, all that fun stuff. And then after they get pre-approved, or we call it conditionally approved, when they're conditionally approved with our company, then we're broadcasting anything else that might work for them as well. So it's not like we're pushing them off that property. We're just exposing them to other similar properties. And then from there, they lock themselves into a property. And all this happens within, I would say within 2 to 4 hours typically, because as we all know, their residents are shopping around constantly. And so the faster that we can get them approved, the faster that we can get them locked into that property. And then I don't have to worry about them going over to one of Brad's properties and I can't rent my property. So we try to move as quickly as possible on those. And then the leases get pushed out. Once the lease is out, it's pretty much like that's the property that they're going to move into.
That makes sense. Brad, any deviation in process there?
No, I mean, it's largely driven by interest in a specific property first, and then you start to, look at their pedigree, and they're looking at the pedigree of your one particular property, or, having their questions answered about that. Maybe in that process, identifying, like Ben indicated, that there may be another property that would be of equal or more interest to them, or that fits their budget a little bit better, or has the extra half bathroom that they're looking for, the bigger backyard, or whatever. So you start to open their eyes to something else that you have. I mean, but it's a little bit like having cars on a used car lot. You show they're on the internet, they're out on all of these various websites, which is where everybody does their business now. And you may have one car that brings them to the lot, and they find out that there's a better fit for them somewhere else, or maybe that car that they came to the lot to see and they're ready to go and they qualify and let's get going. So as Ben indicated, they are all of those sites that Ben was talking about make it very easy to look for properties right now. Maybe almost a little bit too easy, because they have no commitment to any one of them. And so, I mean, boy, if you don't get a response, in minutes on this inquiry for this site, they're literally a swipe to the next one and a swipe to the next one. And they can also compare, as never before, they can compare 200 rental properties in a 45-minute search, and that are all 3-bed, 1-bath, 3-bed, 2-bath, between, let's say, $1,050 and $1,450 in all of the Des Moines metro, without leaving their living room. I mean, they can do all of that, and they can figure all that out, and they can figure out real quick if you're $50 above market. But with the point that Ben was making is they can go and hit apply on all of those other ones real quick. So you better be pretty quick to respond and to qualify and identify if that's somebody you want to pursue a relationship with.
So that puts a lot of stress on you guys as property managers and as staff members, right? To get those responses out there. And that is something, if you're self-managing properties, guys, that you definitely want to consider. It sounds to me like we're moving the era of I'll call them back after work to we need to get a response out there quickly. So as you're building systems, really look at that and factor your own availability into there, where you might be sitting on vacancy a lot longer than what these guys are talking about.
Mitch, can I jump in for 1 second?
Absolutely, buddy.
So for those DIYers out there, something I would recommend I've done it for probably 6 years now, is have a 2-stage approach to the application. So once they get in the door, within 5 minutes, I mean, don't make it take longer than 5 minutes. You have an idea of their criminal background. Do they make enough money? Did they fill out their application? Bang, you're conditionally approved. At least then they feel a sense of connection to you, and they're not out there just, blowing in the wind. And then the second thing, just to help everybody understand.
When you say in the door, you mean virtually, correct? Not physically walking into the house. You mean they've hit you on an inquiry, you're hitting them back with some kind of qualifier so they can respond to it. Yeah,
definitely on the inquiry side. I mean, that has to be, if that's not automated for you because you're a DIYer, it's worth paying $15, $25 a month to get something in place that auto responds for you and kind of helps just while you're working and you're busy throughout the day. You got to have some type of communication with them. Sure. And then on the application side is where it really hits. If somebody applies, I mean, you can't let them sit. You can't let them linger. You got to get them going as quickly as possible and build a rapport and a connection with them. And if you are a DIYer, as I know in our agenda, there's a pros and cons at the end. I have it down as a pro where you have the flexibility. You have more. We're pretty systematized, organized. We are malleable, flexible, of course, but not to the degree of what a DIYer is. Yeah. So the faster you can have those conversations and make it complicated, the faster that they're interested in sticking it out with you, rather than calling Brad or I and saying, nope, here's what you got to do to get into the property. Sure. So DIYers have a leg up in that way. And then the second thing I just wanted to mention to everybody is that it's kind of it always comes up in new contract appointments. we are, as property managers, there's not an MLS, there's not a multiple listing service. So when they're out there shopping around, like Brad's saying, they're swiping left, swiping right on Zillow, on Zumper, on HotPads, on these other sources. And we can't get connected to them until they get connected to us. Unlike the MLS, where you have agents and then you have your working prospects and you kind of get this network, this net that you can just cast into the marketplace. We don't quite have that same concept. So a lot of times people ask, well, do you have tenants hanging out and waiting? Absolutely. We've got 1 million inquiries, but until your property or when your car's sitting on that lot, like Brad's saying, we can't really generate leads specific to your property until that car's parked on our lot.
That makes a lot of sense. We had one quick question come in about applications. What are you guys seeing? Is it mainly locals moving in the area, or are you getting a lot of out-of-town applications?
I would say it hasn't really changed for us locally or coming in from out of town. I'd say we still have a really wide mix of that.
Okay.
I would say maybe on the relocation side, we typically do quite a bit of relocation stuff for big companies in town. And I've seen a little bit less of that, probably just because they've tightened their belts a bit and they're just being smart about who they're bringing in. But I still see a ton of people coming from out of state, close countries. I mean, all over the place.
That's awesome. Any change on your end, Brad?
No, probably the same. With the actual bona fide relocations and dealing with a relocation agent, HR department, things of that sort, we're probably seeing that slow down a little bit. But just as life happens to different people and they all of a sudden say, okay, well, I graduated school in Kansas and I'm moving to Des Moines to start my career type of thing, we're still seeing, I would say, the same mix of in-state, out-of-state. But everybody who's on this call is here for a reason and knows Mitch for a reason. I mean, the Des Moines, Central Iowa area is getting just massive national attention as a great place to, start a career, start a family, even retire, which is crazy to me. I don't know why you would deal with snow and retirement, but nonetheless, because of that, then is getting a lot of attention from a standpoint of everybody who's on this call, right? I mean, that all of those accolades and that attention makes this, with prices that don't fluctuate like the coasts or Phoenix or these other cities, makes this an attractive investment opportunity.
Sure. So would you say, is it a fair assessment then to say there's more out-of-town investors in the last year or so? Would you think so?
Absolutely. I think I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, Mitch. I noticed that really peaking, I would say, in the year between roughly 18 months ago and 6 months ago, if that makes sense. I think that, in my opinion, with properties that, now they're still flying off the shelves. I'm sure there's people on this call who have made some offers on something that is gone like that, and they're fired up about it and irritated that it went that quickly. Not to say it's not happening, especially at least anecdotally, but the feeding frenzy that was going on 18 months ago to about 6 months ago was unreal. I mean, properties were getting, in my opinion, bid into prices where there was going to be 2 or 3 or 4 really, really lean years from an owner's perspective before that really turned around and the market the property caught up with where it was purchased in the market. So it's still hot. I would say it peaked maybe just a little bit ago. And I think that coronavirus is going to help bring about a correction.
So I'd say on the single family side, there's a lot of out-of-town lookers right now, definitely moving in. On the multifamily side, I think we've seen kind of that peak out. It's stayed fairly steady. Anytime you get into those larger units, I think you really start to see, and I'm not a commercial guy, so like we have some apartments, we broker some apartments, that kind of thing. But a lot of the interest in those higher end pieces where we're seeing the high 6s, low 7 cap rates. Those are starting to sit. Those are starting to really kind of sit out there and pause. Ben, did you have anything to add to the out of town part? What?
Yeah, I would say we still get a really consistent flow of inquiries. I mean, sometimes it's hard to keep up with them because they're always hour or 90-minute conversations. You know, they just
When you
go
say
for a
inquiries,
while.
you're talking investor prospects.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, investors inquiring about either a single family or a multifamily. And, you know, we don't do multifamily. We don't do apartments. So usually anything over 4 units, I'll send over Brad's way. Like it's not something that we do. But we still have the conversation. I'm not going to cut them off there in case they want to go down the single family home route, because multifamily, it seems like there was a huge splurge of people with money buying things, like Brad was saying, overpriced, and numbers just didn't work. So then I would talk to them about, you know, here, let's package a portfolio of single families, and they can work. So I still see a consistent flow of it, but I haven't seen a lot of people actually pull the trigger in a while, you know, actually move forward in buying properties. But I do see in our small world, I see, I don't know, D.R. Horton has made an impact for us because we do a lot of new construction and a lot of higher end. And so we were seeing those prices jump up 3, 4, 5% every single year. And the numbers got tighter and tighter and tighter until they just weren't. I mean, you just knew you were going in it for appreciation, and that was it. But now DR is they brought that back a bit. I mean, their price per square foot, I know it's not the highest quality product in the world. We fully understand that, as I'm sure everybody does. But their prices are competitive, and they've caused other builders to have to figure out a way to squeeze their price down 5,000 or 10,000, which really helps in some of those numbers. So I have seen a surge of in clients, and it's kind of because it's our focus too of new construction, because prices have started to either flatten or slightly decline.
Yeah, and I mean, from my perspective, I think those new construction prices, I agree with you, were very much getting inflated for a period of time there, and it makes, there was bound to be some kind of correction there. There was a pretty extensive gap that was occurring. So,
well, Mitch, to get your insight on that, because the land prices haven't really changed. So where's the number coming from?
So it's coming out of the margins. You know, the average on a new construction at the national level is supposed to be about 8%, but we were seeing builders pulling 14 and 18% margins. Well, so now we can see a contraction there. And some of the quality adjustments are happening. Now, I will say, so land prices were staying fairly consistent, but the number of new starts has gone down substantially. So if you look, there's going to be this weird little pause on the land development side because everyone pumped the brakes, including D.R. Horton. Nothing that we were involved with, just through the grapevine. So let me put that asterisk on there. They pumped the brakes on a handful of projects, it sounds like, which is going to put this weird supply-demand issue on the lot side. I had a call with an appraiser a couple of days ago. He's like, hey, you've got this land down on the south side. What are you doing with it? I'm like, we're going to develop it, just not today. He's like, this is a problem because I can't comp anything. There hasn't been a new land piece in 12 months now. So it's kind of it's a weird little bucket, and COVID definitely pushed it out. So totally off topic. I just want to make sure everybody.
Last question for you. In those margins that you're referring to, Mitch, did you see, it felt like maybe some belts were getting a little loosened. People were getting fat in between, like plumbers, electricians, contractors, because they were so dang busy. Are you seeing, because you're in that space, building, are you seeing those numbers come a little tighter as well, which has given you a little bit more?
Yeah, so it got really competitive there for a while. And then it got to the point where we can take our pick of what job we're using. So we're going to throw a few extra 100 here, a few extra 100 there, from the subcontractor standpoint, from that mechanical, electrical, plumbing aspect specifically. Then there's this weird piece where builders weren't paying, right? And we're like, guys, we always pay on time. So then we started seeing those prices get sharpened again. So there's a give and a take inside of that world. So adjusting payment structure is what we took the approach of. We're 2 weeks out, so anytime you submit a bill, 2 weeks later, you get paid. Adjusting that time frame got our prices sharpened again. Did that make sense and answer your question?
Absolutely.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Well, let's kind of jump down the agenda here a little bit. I think we covered a lot of stuff, kind of out of order, and that's totally fine. What kind of gaps are you guys seeing right now in the market? So let me set the stage on that a little bit. So not me, but some people that we know are operating Airbnb type properties, and we saw that come to a screeching halt, right? Do you guys see that coming back?
I'm sure Airbnb has to come back. I mean, it's not like I can't imagine that the company would fold, or the premise, maybe the company, but the premise isn't going to fold. But we have seen, as you would suspect, people saying, I haven't had income for a month or 45 days. My Airbnb, I need to get income. I know it's going to be less, but I need it. So at some point that will come back. You go ahead first, Brad, and I'm sure we'll touch on other topics about gaps in the market.
Yeah, I mean, I think Airbnb in theory isn't going anywhere. Whether or not it survives and prospers in Des Moines, I think it's perfect in certain areas where there's obviously a ton of tourism. And I think that those communities and municipalities recognize the value of that tourism. Maybe, Des Moines recognizes it. We welcome with open arms, all of these different events and concerts and so on and so forth. But it's not like, I don't know, Daytona Beach, Florida or something like that, right? So there's definitely a difference there. And so I think you're going to see, I think municipalities got a little bit caught off guard by Airbnb, and you're going to see come out of this some municipalities basically saying, hey, we can't have rentals that are less than 30 days in length. Well, obviously that gets rid of probably, I don't know the stats, but 90+% of your typical Airbnb client. And I know the margins on Airbnbs, if you've got a spot that keeps getting filled, I mean, they can be fantastic. I'm also aware of a lot of people that were going around, including coming to some of our listings and saying, I want to rent that, basically sign a master lease and say, I want to rent these 4 or 5 properties from you. I'm never going to live in them. I'm just going to Airbnb them. Now, we didn't do that because we didn't see it as a sound opportunity for our clients, the investor, the owner of that property. And thank goodness we didn't, because anybody who did that in the last 2 months has had zero income and has had, if they have, $2,000 a month rentals that they're signed up for, they have $30,000 in overhead every month and zero income for the last 2 months.
For sure.
So, the interplay there is going to be really interesting, Mitch. It's one that I pay close attention to. It's not one that we involve ourselves in. One, because I'm not convinced it's an ongoing enterprise here locally. And two, the level of attention on a 2 or 3 or 4 day basis is, we don't have the bandwidth for that to mix that with our current management. So
that makes sense. Are you guys seeing any need for furnished rentals, or do you see that diminishing as well? Like in our term or midterm type levels?
I won't come at this with a pessimistic attitude. There is a place for furnished for sure. It's just not in our world. People are typically rolling into the moving trucks. They don't really want their own or a couch already sitting there. And I will tell you, if we have a furnished home, it will sit. And then eventually we'll just say, okay, now can we take the stuff out and like lease this thing? And then within 20 days, it's gone. So there is a place for furnished. I just think, like Brad was saying with Airbnb, it's very location driven. If you're downtown or near Principal Park area, heck yeah, that's great. Get the ball players in there or get some executives who don't want to mess with stuff. But out in the suburbs and then, Beaverdale, it's just not something we run into as a long-term success. Sure, needle in the haystack, but just not long-term.
That's great insight, because I know it's floated through the group a handful of times. Hey, should we furnish these? Is that enticing? We've had questions at a management level, and to be frank, the affiliates that run the Airbnb were like, what do we do with these things? How do we lease them up? And I will echo what you're saying is pulling the furniture out. That was the best way to go, and getting them leased up quickly.
One quick thing that Brad mentioned, sorry, Brad, you were talking about Airbnbs and the municipalities kind of shoving them out. I'm seeing a ton of that in the association level, like associations saying, nope, you can't do that anymore. And actually turn out to be great clients for us because they bought it for an investment, just a different type of investment, and they got to keep it because they just can't get out of it. So I think associations in the townhome and condo world are definitely going to shove those things around a little bit.
For
Yeah,
sure.
I agree. And most of the HOAs have in their declarations, no shorter term for rental than 30 days. And if they didn't, they're now adding that in very quickly, calling those emergency meetings. And honestly, furnished versus unfurnished, agree completely. And very candidly, anything that, I mean, let's be honest, any of the furnishings that anybody's leaving behind in their rental property aren't attracting anybody to that house. And nobody wants to put their butt in your butt print on your old couch. So they have their own stuff. They love their couch. They love their furnishings. They love their bed. They don't want to deal with yours. We'll let our owners, I guess, enjoy the idea that a furnished client may come along, and we'll let them keep their furniture as long as it looks all right in a property as we show it. But as soon as that person or that approved applicant says, you know, I've got my own stuff, I don't have any use for all of this, it's time to go. And we've set and managed that expectation early on with that owner. And the other thing, from our perspective, it's awful hard to manage if you're having to deal with somebody else's furnishings. I mean, it's hard enough to spot every nick in the floor or the walls or, you know, everything on move in and move out that is different and that might exceed ordinary wear and tear. I'm sure not going to flip over the couch and see what they did, or, you know, the cushions. And it's awful hard for us to manage that. So it's not attractive from a manager standpoint. And I would tell you, from an investment standpoint, all you're trying to do is pawn your crummy furniture off on somebody else.
I would ditto everything that Brad's saying, for sure. And there are some DIYers who are going to go down that path, though. And so if you do go down that path, a couple recommendations. Brad kind of alluded to it. Over document everything. You know, you can't take enough pictures, and make sure your pictures are time and date stamped and still photos. And then the second thing is, if it's your crummy crap with your own butt print, just acknowledge and sign an agreement that says, I don't care about any of this stuff. So if it breaks, it breaks, and you don't have to be responsible for replacing it.
That's great advice. Thank you. What about, so right at Brad here, what do you think about houses versus apartments versus townhomes, and also bed bath counts? Where are you seeing the gap that exists or will be coming up? What's the ideal?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously we manage all of them, and Ben and his group do as well. I don't personally love condos and townhomes. I feel like it's easy they're attractive from a new investor standpoint because typically there's an HOA. We don't have to deal with snow removal or lawn care or roof or siding or whatever. But it's been my experience that if you took those HOA fees every month and set those aside and treated yourself as an HOA with a single family home, you're probably going to be in really good shape with regard to those repairs anyway. And you don't have to worry about the HOA's management or mismanagement of those funds. But the reason I really don't love them is, from an investor standpoint, at least not compared with maybe a similar single family home or something along those lines, is it's very easy to commoditize those offerings. And what I mean by that is, if you get a townhome in a development that has 240 townhomes, 80 of which are rentals, then probably at any given time, maybe 6, 7, 8 of those are available at any given time, which means yours is only coming off the market when it's the lowest priced. And I mean, down to $25 difference. Until yours is 25 lower than the rest, nobody's paying much attention to yours. And you may be dealing with somebody who bought theirs on a short sale, or who didn't maybe purchased it not at an arm's length transaction. So they've got a competitive advantage all of a sudden over you because their margins are drastically different, and they've got the exact same thing.
And from a property standpoint, in the townhomes, I mean, they're the same layouts over and over. And it doesn't matter if you change the color of the paint or update the kitchen, because you're in that space. You're literally comparing mentally apples to apples on hard stats, right? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, beds, baths, square footage, layout, 2 bedrooms up and a full bath. And then you've got the main level has living room, dining area, and a nice kitchen and a half bath. And then whatever there is in the basement with a 2-stall attached garage that is underneath one of the bedrooms upstairs that walks straight into the kitchen, right? And so you're looking at that same thing, 2 doors from another one, 6 doors from another one, still in the exact same location in town. So same amenities, same distance to Hy-Vee, same distance to whatever else. And it starts to really be difficult to be unique and differentiate and I think close down vacancies quickly. Obviously, one of the biggest expenses, losses in property investing is vacancy loss. And if you've got something that 6 other people have on the market at the same time as you, it's really difficult to, get your vacancy from, 45 days down to 15 days or something like that. So it's difficult to differentiate your offering. Whereas with single family homes, they're all in one way or another fairly unique in what they have to offer. Of course, there's certainly some development now that are same home, block by block. But generally speaking, they're much more unique product than townhomes and condos and things like that. So
Yeah. Ben, did you want to comment on the townhomes? Is it similar, or do you have a totally different? I know your demographics very different.
I mean, I'll say depends on the investor's goals, right? Like how they're coming into it can vary so much. We view it with a 3-legged stool approach. So the 3 legs are monthly cash flow, like hard cash in your pocket, appreciation rate, and then mortgage pay down. Mortgage pay down is going to happen. Pretty much whatever you own, it's going to happen. Appreciation and monthly cash flow are the hard ones. Those are the ones that you just have to be aware of, and you always want to make sure that you have 2 out of the 3 working for you, or the investment doesn't work. It works really well when all 3, but it always works when 2 out of the 3 are working. And in the condo townhome world, that can be hard. Cash flow is usually a little bit higher, but there's hardly any appreciation in those things. It takes so long. And like Brad's saying, the association eats up so much of the cash that it's really hard for those to work. But with that being said, it's also entry level. It's entry level to get into a nice caliber or a nicer caliber home. So, you got $125,000 or you got 130 that you're approved for. You can typically get into a 2 or 3 bedroom condo that's going to rent somewhere between, $900 and $1,200 all day. It takes the $25 jumps, the $50 jumps like you guys are talking about, but they will move, and the maintenance portion of it is so much less. So it really depends on the investor's goals, but single family homes are usually the home runs. Those are the ones that hit all 3 out of the park. It's just being really wise about where you're at and where you're buying. There's a spot in the market where everybody wants to be, and that's the value add properties. I would say, 8 out of 10 calls that I take are, hey, I'm an investor looking to buy a property and put money into it and rent it out. And it's like, yep, so is everybody else. So they're hard to come by. But that price point is typically between, 140 to 190, maybe even up to 200. And when they get on the market, I mean, gosh, do they go. So I usually recommend our investors not to avoid it, but just not to get their hopes up and say you're going to have 10 properties that are going to hit the market in the next 90 days. Like, let's be realistic and say, let's keep our eyes open for 1. And then, oh, by the way, let me expose you to these other 2 that are doing well, that are a little bit of a niche on the marketplace right now, that are performing at a high level. and putting $50,000 down. I mean, that's usually the amount of money that we're talking for somebody to getting into their first investment property, or right around that, 30 to 50. If you're looking at buying a $150,000 property and putting 30 down to buy it on a commercial loan, and then you got to put 20 into it, what's the difference between that and putting all 50 down and buying a $250,000 property, turnkey, don't have to put a dollar into it, appreciation rates averaging almost 4%. Rent rates are extremely strong, vacancies extremely low. So when you look at it over the course of a long period of time, it tends to work, but you just have to be open-minded to just not be stuck in the Burr model, because the Burr model is really hard in my mind, or in my experience in the Des Moines market. At least it has been the last 5-6 years.
For sure. Yeah, everyone's on the first BR of that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone's looking there. If you could wave a magic wand, though, what would be your ideal unit? Would it be a 2-story or 1-story, 1.5-story? What's the bedroom count? Like, if you were coming at this market saying I could have exactly what I wanted, what would that look like?
It is, for us, it's a 2-story home. 4 bedrooms is the new 3-car garage. If you can get 4 bedrooms in your house, your rent rate's going to be higher across the board.
Interesting.
So 4 bedrooms, and as close to 2,000 square feet as possible, 1,800, 1,900. We used to have this same conversation about 3 bedrooms. Honestly, I would say if you bought a 2-bedroom, you were capping yourself at, $1,200, $1,300. But now we just elevated that conversation to 4 bedrooms, because their appreciation rates are so strong on the rental side. The price point also is a cap on it. About 275 is around where it stops working as well, and you start to take your $200-$300 monthly cash flow starts turning into 100 or an even break even. But yeah, a few years ago, it was 3 bedrooms, buying up those old Regencies that were just put carpet and paint on them and rent those suckers out. And now it's, for us, a perfect rental property that will have extremely low vacancy, extremely high rents, and extremely high appreciation, is that 4-bedroom, around 2,000 square foot, new construction or completely remodeled. There's some really nice ranches built in 1995 to 2005. Maybe not quite the Regency stuff, a level above that. But you finish the basement, so 2 up, 2 down, and put a bath and a living room down there. I mean, you're renting for $2,200 to $2,400 all day, and you're dealing with a demographic that's just different, just different. So
you're talking again
us.
on the north, from east to west, kind of north of the suburbs. You're not seeing that in the Des Moines city area, right? Not
as much. I mean, your property, you built some stuff that works that we got involved in. The south side, there's a couple little pockets there that still work. Like Easter Lake has cookie cutter stuff down there that works pretty well. And there's some townhomes and stuff by the Southbridge Mall that work really well. But for the most part, we try to stay away from the east side, especially the far east side. And then once you get out to like Pleasant Hill, Bondurant, Altoona, it starts turning the corner again and working. But yeah, for the most part, Mitch, you're talking west of the interstate and north of the interstate.
That makes sense. What about you, Brad? If you could wave that magic wand, what's that look like? Again, knowing your demographics a little different.
Oh, there you go. I love 2 1s to 3 2s in that 1,000 to 1,600 square foot range, where there's just a lot of value, a good efficient layout, all throughout the metro. There's anything in that single family homes for say 1,050 to 1,600. I love them. I mean, they there's a lot of attention to them. We're not, as an investor or as a marketer of the property for prospective tenants, we're not competing with quite as much with prospective home buyers who are tenants. We're not dealing as much in that avenue. I feel like those are always there. I agree with Ben. The appreciation on those is not going to be as strong. Cash flow is likely to be better. The margins are likely to be better. And with a properly priced property, regardless of location, with some very small exceptions. We're able to find high quality tenants for all of those. You know, I mean, high quality for a 2-bed, 1-bath, 900 square foot single family home with a 1-stall or a 2-stall detached garage on the east side that rents for $1,025 is going to be different than the $2,400 rental that Ben is talking about. But we're also talking about a group of people who are likely to stay as tenants longer in their life. Purchasing that house may not be as big of an option or a goal for them. And so I like that we don't have to compete with that. Now we love being up in the properties that Ben's discussing, because it is a different level of management. It's a breath of fresh air.
And when you say different level of management, really what you're saying is touch points, right? How many times are we touching those tenants every month? Yeah. Is that?
Yeah, but then to be fair too, it's not like that's easy. Biggest knucklehead we have in the world right now is in a $1,900 a month rental. So it happens across all platforms, and some of our best tenants are, you know, in some of those $950 single family homes. So there can be knuckleheads across all different groups of folks. So
Absolutely. I'll agree with Brad that there's definitely knuckleheads across the board. There are, I think the biggest difference between what we do and where that portfolio, you know, the 1,000 to 1,300, the touch points are similar, Mitch. It's the intentionality of the touch points. So like ours are proactive conversations, and Brad's just, I mean, he's got more people calling, I would assume. I'm making some assumptions, but if you're in that price point, you know, you probably have more maintenance requests coming in. You probably have more people complaining about their neighbor, or just that different. It's just a different style. It's the same work. It's just done a different way. And yeah, when you get into 2,000 a month properties, people are entitled. I mean, they're whiny. They complain about the dumbest thing. I get a little candid with you, but I mean the silliest things that come up. Mitch, you've recently had to deal with this with us, actually. You know, some of these little petty things that we run across, and you almost want to just say, "Are you kidding? I mean, you got a brand new property. You know, everything's perfect. What are you complaining about?" So
I believe my response was LOL on the one request. So.
Yeah, it happens across the board wherever you're at. I also want to agree with Brad, he was talking about 1,000 to maybe 1,100 to 1,400. If you can get a rent, or if you can get a single family with 3 bedrooms anywhere in that price point, it is gonna fly. I mean, a 3-bedroom in really anywhere in Des Moines that's between 1,100 and 1,400 or 1,500 just goes. I don't know the east side as well as far as market goes, but like when we get something in the Beaverdale area, or even close to 26th Street, that area, it's a 3-bed built in 1958, 1965 or something, but it's 3-bed with paint and carpet. Bang. I mean, it is gone. So that's a cool spot to be in if you can find them.
I have a question for you, for both of you. How do you guys work with investors? Do you guys have an investor usually come to you and not have a property, and you help them find one? Or do they have the property and they're hiring you to take it off their hands? Walk me through each of those.
I would assume that we both have a similar answer. Both. You know, folks who are coming and they're brand new and they say, "Hey, what do I buy? How should I buy it?" And then others who have 2 to 40 properties that they currently are self-managing, that they're looking to expand their portfolio. We actually have a real estate investment advisor, Aria, as we call her, in our office, where she just takes guys, either starters or kind of the intermediate investor, and helps them runs pro formas and pushes out like hot deals, depending on what's on the market across the board. We try to look at everything to be knowledgeable about what's happening out there, but both of them we help. We just have a person that is dedicated to helping that person either get off the ground or continue to build their portfolio. I'll say that when you get to a certain level, that you're not as interested. You've got the knowledge, you've got the wisdom, and you like the chase. That's fun for you. And so then you stop asking for as much help, and you like to do more of it, because as an investor, not a landlord, you have the time. Because as an investor, your goal is to, separate from your day-to-day and be able to spend more time on real estate, because it's a lot of people who are on this call probably have a passion for it or are excited to have a passion for it. And when you get to that level, you don't want to give it up to some RIA. You want to go chase down the deals yourself and walk through that stuff.
Yeah, and we get them both too. Folks who have no properties and are looking for that guidance on the first opportunity. Folks who have 10 and are looking for the hands-free approach so they can spend their time, any time that they do have for their investment portfolio, focusing on the next investment, looking at how the current portfolio is performing, how to improve that, how to find that next good investment, and whatever it takes. I mean, and we have that candid conversation with the folks who are looking who fall into any of those categories. What do you want that next one to look like? What are your objectives for your money? What does that money look like? Is this a cash flow, cash on cash return play? Is this a long-term set it and forget it, as minimize headaches to the maximum extent possible and maximize appreciation play? Those are kind of two very different ends of the spectrum right there. Where do we fall on that spectrum? And then, hope to help them figure out the answer to that question, then supplement their search, I would say, through professionals like Mitch. I mean, and just add that extra 10 or 15% of information, as well as we have properties in our current management portfolio. We know owners who say, boy, if the right offer came along, I'd consider selling this because I'm trying to liquidate this and move to Florida, or whatever the case may be. So
yeah. Thanks for that, guys. That's good insight, kind of into both of the processes, right? So shifting gears a little bit, what's your biggest advice for DIYers, and what are the pros and cons of using property management? I'll pass it to you first, Brad.
The pros are obviously hands-free, headache-free, worry-free. We're dealing with the pitfalls for you. We're dealing with 3 a.m. phone calls. We're dealing with the angry tenants, the knuckleheads. Those aren't becoming personal relationships of yours. Most of the DIYers that we deal with, that we talk to before they make the transition, they all tell a similar story. One, oftentimes their property is undermarketed. So the price they're charging is too little. They love the little old lady or person who lives there, or they're getting tired of the person who lives there telling them about their ex-boyfriend and their new boyfriend and why their rent's late because their car broke down for the 6th week in a row. But they answer those calls by saying, yes, we'll give you 2 more weeks or 3 more weeks or 4 more weeks, because they're a decent human being and they can't imagine saying no in that situation, because they remember in 1982 when their car broke down.
So you'll be the bad guy there. You'll be like Grammy guy. Yeah.
That's what we've been hired for.
Exactly.
Like, we just tell people, we're decent human beings. We try to be very reasonable and courteous and conscientious and listen and do all of those fantastic things. But at the end of the day, if Mitch hires me to handle his property and we're not collecting rent, we're not fixing things, we're not doing whatever, we're not getting things done with the tenant, we should be fired. And so we tell the tenant that, like, I don't want to lose my job here. I don't want to get fired. So,
and I could speak into that for you, Brad, so that you don't feel awkward. But Brad's got one of our properties that he manages, and that tenant pays very, very well every month, because he set that precedent on the front end. Hey, because I told him that, right? Hey, if you don't pay on the 5th, we're kicking you. That's not what the former landlord was doing, but that is our directive, and Brad executes on that very well.
Yeah, and that former landlord's a perfect example. He was a DIY guy and developed a relationship with this tenant to the point where that tenant felt like they were very good friends, as did the landlord. The problem was the tenant kept borrowing money from the landlord by not paying. And so then he brought us on when, and I'm not going to talk out of class here, but it is the most that's ever been owed on a rental property that we've ever taken over management on. And not by a slim margin, by double anything else we've ever taken, at least probably 3 or 4 times. And then we started for him collecting and kind of being the bad guy, with still a hint of good guy from the previous owner's directives. And then Mitch came to town. Mitch is a great guy, but made it very clear, and we made it very clear when the ownership changed hands, that that rent was a paramount concern, and it's been very good since then. So I'm gonna tell you that as far as the pros is being disconnected from all of that, and having the time to be able to focus your efforts on more important things, whether that be family, work, or the growth of your portfolio, not worried about chasing rents and twisting wrenches and fixing leaky toilets, right? So those are the pros. The cons, I mean, are you looking for the cons of hiring a property manager, Mitch?
Yeah, man, if you're comfortable sharing.
There are 0. Realistically speaking, of course, it's the flip side of that. It's not being as involved. If you want to be really hands-on with repairs, or with what is going on in the tenants' lives, or why rent is late and things like that, and some people need that level of connection, need that that control. It's probably not going to be a great fit, because it's very, and I'm sure Ben would echo this, and I'm sure Mitch, you would echo this. It's extremely difficult for us to do what we're supposed to do when the landlord is also in direct communication with the tenant. We try to tell the landlords, for their benefit, we're trying to set up a firewall between you and your tenants. Everything they send your way bounces off that, comes to us. If it gets through to you, tell them, contact Renter's Warehouse. Here's the phone number, here's the email address. And that's so we don't have 2 cooks in the kitchen. It's not because we want to do anything unseemly or take advantage of anybody or anything like that. It's just so that we can have a singular voice and a singular purpose in the way that we want to address things. But if you have that desire to have that level of involvement, obviously having somebody else involved in the middle there is going to rob you of that connection. Obviously, there's cost associated with what we do. We don't deal with all these lovely difficulties for free. So there is cost associated, and that eats into the margin on the properties. I would tell you, and I think Ben would as well, and I suspect Mitch would as well, that there's a good reason for that cost, and it's going to allow your portfolio to grow. Most people start to get choked out at 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 properties with a full-time job if they don't get somebody involved on the management side, because the weight of it just becomes too much. The day-to-day weight of it just becomes too significant. So I don't know if I hit 3 cons there. I would argue that there probably aren't 3 total.
Perfect. Thanks, man. Same question over you, Ben. What are the 3 pros and cons from your perspective, boss?
Well, Brad did a good job there. So obviously everything that Brad said is all true. One thing that I'd mention to everybody here is you're talking to 2 reputable companies in the Des Moines metro area, companies that take pride in what they do. And like Brad said, we're just people trying to do a great job, perform at a high level, communicate in every second we can. I mean, it's 6:30 and we're on this call. So it's not an 8 to 5 job. This is a job that requires whatever is needed for the day. So no matter what, if you're working with Renters Warehouse or you're working with RPM Iowa, I can assure you the best intentions are there. It's not a perfect world though. So don't expect a property manager to always be perfect for you, but what
you
they
won't
can
take those calls at 8:45 and be out there in 15 minutes. Come on, man.
I guess it depends on who's calling. But yeah, just don't expect perfection, and just know that you're dealing with companies who want to do a great job and communicate at a really high level with you within reason. We have families and lives and stuff too, and so does our staff. So with that being said, some of the cons, obviously costs, like Brad said, we do cost money. It's the only way that it's a viable business, and we're not in this to break even. We're in this to make a profit and get ahead in our lives. And maybe we want to do investing as well, and there's only one way to do that, and that's to make money. So there is cost, but as both companies on this call we're invested in you as the investor. So we want to make money when you make money. Our goal is not to bleed you dry. So cost is typically a non-starter for us, because it's like, hey, what are you renting it for? $800. Perfect. Well, we could rent it for $925, and we'll completely pay for our management service just inside of raising rents for you, lowering vacancy, keeping your maintenance costs down, all that fun stuff. So when you hear costs, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to cost you on a monthly basis. So that's one. Involvement, like Brad said, your involvement drops slightly for a good reason, though. I mean, that's why you're talking to us, is to let us handle the stuff, and you can get out of the way. If you had to spend an hour or two even thinking about your investment property, what's your hourly wage, and what are you losing by doing that? And how much more could you possibly be doing in your job to make more money, to buy more investments? So it's just it's not necessarily an involvement, because we'll call you, we'll talk to you, we'll email you, we'll keep you posted on what's going on, but you don't have to stress about all the crap that's happening inside the property or upcoming, that's going to be coming in the property. And then flexibility. Every DIYer thinks that by the time they come on to us, we're just this cookie cutter shop that doesn't have any flexibility, and we're unreasonable and we're cold hearted. And that's not the case. With both companies, I can guarantee you, especially COVID-19, I feel like proved that. There's only one way to get 100% rent collection. That's to be flexible. I mean, you can't do it by just sticking to the 5th of the month or the 2nd of the month every single month. So flexibility does not diminish. We just set expectations differently. We set them on the front end, and we hold all the way until the breaking point, and then we'll give, and we'll be reasonable, and we have souls, and we're humans. So we need to sleep at night as well. So I don't think you actually lose flexibility. You gain flexibility because you have a standard to start from.
Yeah, that protocol is really important, and not being that enforcer of that protocol really, I know for me, so I have staff members that manage our properties. I do not physically manage them, because exactly what you're explaining from the DIY side, that compassionate, oh yeah, you're my buddy, I want to help you out. That was a struggle for me DIYing. So we had to build the staff around, nope, here's the protocol, here's how it happens. And I have to be disconnected. I cannot be involved. I can be a hard ass sitting in my office, not in front of a tenant though. It's a character flaw.
You got to walk the talk.
Yeah. And for someone else's property, I can go to the mat for that. But when it comes to my own, I'm like,
It's different. Well, three other. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Somebody was going to talk.
No, go ahead. No, yeah, go ahead. If you got more things, let's hear them.
I was just going to cover 3 more quick things, and I know Brad would definitely, with his background, get on top of legal protection. I can't tell you how many times a new property comes on, you look at the lease, and you're like, holy smokes, thank the Lord they didn't move out. So just all kinds of stuff in legal protection ways with leases and addendums and deposit return, all kinds of stuff like that. You're going to get exposed to different stuff here working with a management company. Both RPM and Renters Warehouse are franchises. So we have the national exposure to stuff changing very quickly. I mean, all this stuff changing in California. Well, we are California. It's just going to take us about 10 years to get there. So all the stuff that we're seeing there, we get to learn now and maybe adopt some of the stuff and keep rent control out, do these different things to protect what we have here. So legal protection is definitely a big one. Resident satisfaction on the front end, it seems like it might go down, but we find that it goes drastically up. When you bring on a new client and they have a tenant-filled property, and they know that a management company is now looking out for them, the first thing they want to do is throw that landlord under the bus, right? He didn't fix this, she didn't do that, whatever. And now they have this company who can fix all of those things for them. So you end up turning this sometimes really bad situations into super positive scenarios because you get involved. And then our goal is to stay in touch with our residents. I mean, our goal is to have a 75% retention every year. A little of a stretch goal, probably not achievable, but our goal is to achieve that. So we don't make money by turning properties. It costs a lot of labor to turn properties. We want occupied properties, quiet, with the right expectations across the board. And then last thing is market and leasing. If this kind of ties into the recommendation for DIYers that you asked, Mitch, this is a huge one. If you are a DIYer, invest in a good camera. I mean, iPhones are so good now, but you gotta take good pictures. There's a statistic last year that came out: 7 out of 10 residents wouldn't even go look at the home if they didn't like the pictures. So your net just went down to 3 people. And what are the chances that you're one of that's that one person? So good pictures is super important. Take time and write a good ad. Don't be over dramatic in your ad. Be honest and just say what it is, and start those expectations in the ad. It starts on the front end of what the property brings. So marketing is a huge one. And I know that both companies on here, we make money with occupied properties. So if we're not leasing, we're not getting paid. So I can assure you, marketing is something that we put at the forefront. It's the head of the snake for sure.
And when you say good pictures, there's a difference between good pictures and too good of pictures, right? Like, you don't want to have the showcase, this is the great kitchen layout of this angle, and then you walk in there and it's actually a closet. You know what I mean?
That's
like
very true. Like, they need to be accurate pictures, but I'll give you, I'll give it away here. iPhone 11s now have this 0.5 feature on them for their camera. If you, as a DIYer, if you just have an iPhone 11 or upgrade yourself to an iPhone 11 and hit this 0.5 feature and stand at good angles, not deceiving angles, but good angles. You're not taking a picture of a wall, you're taking a picture of a room. You will be blown away at the impact that it has, and not having boxes and vacuums and stuff on the countertops and lights off, toilet seats down. Just Google a couple things and they will give you, top 10s of what to do to get your property prepped ready for pictures. And if you do those 10 things, you will be one of the premier properties out there for sure. There's a lot of companies out there. There's more now than ever before. Back in 2011, when I started doing this, there wasn't a whole lot of us out there. Since then, there's quite a few. Read the reviews, look at their pictures, check out their website, just know a little bit about them prior to letting them lease your $250 or $200 or $150 or $100,000 asset. It's a lot of money that you're putting in their hands.
And one thing to remember, guys, on the DIY side, reviews fluctuate, right? So a property manager that's got a 5-star review might be great or might not be. There's going to be a certain level of dissatisfied tenants, especially on the move-out process, when, as property managers, we're playing that middleman, right? We have to protect the owner's asset. We also have to be fair and equal to our tenants. But in some cases, you can't make everyone happy. And when a tenant disagrees with the security deposit, you can expect a bad review in a lot of cases. They don't have a lot of leash available to them, so that's how they take it out.
You hit the nail on the head there, Mitch. I mean, if you see 5-star, I always say the best thing to look at is the quantity and not necessarily the quality. If you look at a company that has over 100 reviews, over 150 reviews, and you start reading through, especially some of their recent ones, last 6 months, year, 2 years, you keep an eye on those. You can really kind of tell of how that company interacts with their folks and if they respond back and forth. So volume of reviews for me is a pretty big measuring stick. And then you want some bad ones in there because this is an imperfect world. So if it's all 5 stars, it's like, okay, what are these guys doing? Hiring reviews out there? You want some real stuff, some tangible stuff, because that stuff happens. You can't be perfect in every way.
And also, everyone, remember this is Iowa, and in Iowa, there's a tendency to not ask for good reviews. Like, it's a thing. And anything to add, Brad?
I would add that the bad review and the number, as Ben was saying, the bad reviews are probably a reflection of that company doing precisely what you've asked them to do, of standing in the way and making sure that the law is followed. Mitch hit the nail on the head with regard to security deposit dispositions. That's probably where that's always a big conflict. Everybody always, in their opinion, leaves the property in lovely condition, and we've got a video for move in and a video for move out, and we can compare the two bookends and tell you that that's certainly not the case. But they always want to contest it, or at the very least leave their parting shot in a review online. So that it happens, but yeah, I would echo Ben's sentiment, and the other thing I would tell you too, and this is kind of where Ben started his last comment, but there's absolutely going to be mistakes. We are in the business of dealing with everybody else's problems that they want nothing to deal with, whether that's the tenant's problems, the landlord's problems, often both the same. That's what we do. That's exactly what we deal with on a daily basis. And by the very nature of it, we're going to do the best we can. So if you find a manager and like Ben said, RPM and Renters Warehouse are both this type of company. If you find a manager who's going to try hard and who's going to work with your best interest in mind, and oftentimes your best interests are aligned with the tenants, and there are some times where they're divergent. If you find that manager who's going to do the best by you, you're going to want to stick with them. That's a good partner to have in this business. If you find one who tells you there'll never be a mistake, there'll never be an error, there'll never be anything, they're lying to you. Get real comfortable with that real quick if you want to work with them, because that's a lie. I mean, there's just no way that they're with any level of value. There's no way that you could say that there's never going to be a problem or that everything's ever going to be done perfectly. And I had a friend of mine who's involved in real estate said he was just talking. This is just an anecdotal story, so bear with me. But he was just talking to another friend he knows that has 660 units under management. Let's call it small to mid-sized multifamily. And according to that individual, they did not have one late rent payment in either April or May during coronavirus. And of course, my friend's telling me this because, I'm saying, well, we're at 84% right now, and then we got to 86 and then 88 and so on and so forth, similar to the numbers that Ben and I have shared thus far tonight. And so he's throwing that in my face like, this dude, got 660 out of 660 by the 5th. I said, well, he's lying. I mean, and Mitch, Ben, is that possible?
It's very, very unlikely.
Very, very unlikely. Yes.
He might be managing all government subsidized 100%. That's
It'd be almost the opposite of no guaranteed rents.
Well, yeah, I would say that's not possible. I'd be willing to go there. Yeah. One DIY suggestion is, when you're considering management, right? You don't have to move all of your properties to any singular manager. There's definitely a phase-in process, and sometimes that relationship needs to be built over time, not straight out of the gate. Don't ever hedge all of your funds into one basket, right? And the other part of that is, it's good to see kind of the process difference of utilizing different companies. So not only process, but what's that lease look like? Brad and Ben, I'm sure you guys handle late fees differently. Who keeps them, who doesn't? I don't know, I'm assuming. There's a lot of pieces in there. And rental standards are likely different. I'm sure your guys' rental standards are written down and very specific, but and again, it's likely that they're flexible. I know from our management portfolio, we say not flexible. Rental standards are rental standards. These are in place to protect you as an owner, and it's a best practice. I'm not willing to take you on. Well, we're not taking on anyone, but we weren't willing to take on management unless it was by this very cookie cutter management style. And that's fine. We, as property managers, we don't need to make everyone happy, and it's a disservice to try to do that, because by doing that, we discredit what we're doing. We can't provide a consistent level at that pace.
Yeah, that's well said, Mitch. And there's so many times where Brad's taken a property from us and we've taken a property from him or other companies. And it's not a big deal. I mean, it happens. Like, we can't be, the imperfection conversation comes back, right? Like, let's say Brad goes through the nitty gritty of something and he's the one who ends up looking like the bad guy. I'm going to win in that scenario because I look like the gold standard. But in reality, if I would have been in his shoes, the same thing would have happened. So it's all the time that stuff happens. Now, there are some out there, I will say that for sure, they are substandard, but you can find that out yourself. And I always say when I'm sitting on a management appointment, shop around, like look at reviews, look at people's websites, call them, talk to them. Can you actually ask them for advice and not just them selling you on their service or trying to tell you something about what their company is like? You can tell usually pretty quick within just a couple minutes of what that company is going to be like or who you're talking to. So yeah, this is a good point, Mitch, for sure.
And when you call into a company, that first person that you're talking to is probably who your tenants are talking to as well. So keep that in mind. That's a great weed out mentally. I know, I'll speak candidly, in preparation for this, I called a handful of other companies here in town. Never heard back from them, which I find ironic. I'm glad you guys are around here. Don't hear that wrong. But yeah.
So I'll tell you something. Just from in my world, we have there's marketing platforms, right, that you pay for to try to be at the top in different places. The number one competitor, really the only competitor that I go against in those marketing platforms is Brad. And that's because we're both intentional about our business and go about it a certain way. There's another 25 companies that you don't see on that list. And then we do an audit, every year. We call around and we see who answers and who doesn't. And it blows your mind when you're a new client, who calls back and who doesn't, or does it take 2 days or 5 days or 5 minutes? It's incredible. So response time actually, I think, speaks volumes to that person's capability to answer their phone on a normal day-to-day basis.
Absolutely. And I can tell you, so 2016, we were shopping. We were trying to make the decision, are we going to build out the self-management platform, or are we going to hand this off? In Brad, as well as RPM, you guys were the only responses in a timely manner. And I know our one of the properties that we were shopping at the time just didn't fit Ben's portfolio. So I want to shoot a high accolade to these guys as a group. If people are asking for referrals, this is where we're pushing them already from our experience with both companies. So
appreciate that, Mitch. Take all the referrals you give.
Is from the group side, any questions? Feel free to mic on or just drop a chat, and we'd be happy to field them. We've got one question that came in that we didn't cover. Do you guys think that COVID-19, will more people work from home as a result of this? If so, do you see a demand increasing for a working room or an office space?
From my perspective, I definitely think we're going to see a real shift on the commercial office space, retail space, and I think for the negative, and if you own those properties, and I think it'll level out though after time, but I think we're going to see an immediate response to this where people are all of a sudden. I made the comment earlier, I wish I didn't own my own building because I realize a lot of my employees can now work from home. Kind of trying to be funny, not necessarily successfully, but I think that we are going to see some of that. I don't necessarily know that I bet you would see more of an impact on some of the higher end properties that we have and that Ben has with regard to, having that dining room that can also be an office or that extra space. It seems to me that it just depends. What jobs are we going to see more from home? What's the level and the nature of that job, and where do they fit in the tenant profile world? Certainly not service industry, certainly not restaurant, certainly not hospitality. None of those jobs are switching. So some of those are unfortunately closing, but there'll be other restaurants to come in and replace them. So I think I think probably in the higher end, you'll see a little bit of demand for that. But I think we've already seen that. I think we're already seeing a lot more location neutral long before coronavirus reared its ugly head. So,
You know, what's interesting about that, Brad, is we've actually had in the last 30 days more requests for like Cat 5 to be installed or things directly tied to home businesses. And, you know, we're pretty exclusive, no home business if it's a service-based, you know, daycare, that type of stuff. But if you're, you know, you're running a sales machine out of your den, of course. So that I didn't really piece that together until you just mentioned that. But yeah, I mean, we've had probably 10 requests for that this month, which is abnormal. I mean, we hardly ever get that type of request.
Awesome responses, guys. We had another question come in. When taking on new clients, how are you guys evaluating home value right now? Has that changed from physically going to the location? Or are you doing some kind of virtual? And also, of course, you know, where are we coming out from the rent side? Is it going up? Is it staying neutral? Seeing?
I suspect Ben will probably echo this, but we do a lot of analysis on the rental. I'm assuming we're meeting on the rental capability of the
Yep.
property. So what's this going to rent for? We do, I mean, when we're on a call with a prospective buyer of a property, or they've got a property that they've already purchased, they want to know what it'll rent for, or whatever the case may be. We take a look at either the listing. If there is a listing, that's ideal because we get a little better sense of the property. Otherwise, we take a look at the assessor's page and identify, you know, beds, baths, square footage, location, so on and so forth. And then able to start an analysis at that point in time, which we then supplement later on when we're able to, whether that's the next day or a week later or whatever, when we're able to get into the property. Obviously, with coronavirus, that has put potentially some delay with regard to getting into properties, especially if they're currently tenant occupied, because we're trying to limit the amount of exposure for everybody involved, including the tenants. If they're vacant, though, usually you can get in there pretty quickly. So I don't know. It really hasn't, Ben, I guess I'd be interested in hearing your response. It hasn't necessarily drastically changed our process in that respect, unless there's an occupied property and there's a concern with social distancing. So,
Have you seen dollars change at all? Average rent rates, or is that?
no, I wouldn't say so. I would say that rent rates are on their average steady, slight improvement from the winter weather into this lovely Seattle weather that we've had for the last 10 days. But no, we're in that seasonal improvement, I would say, as well as the overall year-to-year gradual improvement. We may see if investment dollars change and interest rates and things like that affect the market on a more global perspective, we may see rents level off a little bit in the next 6, 12, 18 months, depending on the longevity of COVID-19. But I would say it's probably too early to tell that. But in the short term, month to month, season over season, I would say we haven't noticed significant depression at all.
Yeah, I would say about the same thing, front to back there. On new client appointments, I would say some of them have been affected, but for the most part, not really. You know, we just keep our distance. We're just smart. We wash our hands. We use hand sanitizer. We wipe stuff down. They let us in. We walk through it. If it's an occupied property, of course, we'll figure out another way to make that happen. We'll delay it. We'll do whatever we have to do to make it work. So hasn't had a drastic impact on the new business side of things. More Zoom calls and video calls than I've ever done before, which was a change for me. You know, I'm pretty face-to-face as much as possible. And then the second thing you were asking about rent rates, I would say I haven't seen any change in the market, except for, and it's because we're just in it so much, on the top side, it started to plateau a little more. Our properties that rent for over $3,000 a month have been a lot harder to move this year because I think that clientele is they're wise. You would think if you're in that demographic, you're probably pretty wise. And so you're probably choosing to be a little more conservative right now and not make some big changes. So renting anything over $29.95 right now is pretty difficult. And I would even say between 25 and 29 is difficult. So kind of that sweet spot that still moves really, really well, 25 and under, you don't really see any impacts. You still see the appreciation each year.
Fantastic insights, guys. Thanks for those. Hey, Thomas, it looks like your mic's open. Did you want to ask a question, buddy?
Yeah, hey Mitch, thanks. I did have a question, and it's not COVID related at all. So I constantly see all of the new apartment construction going on, downtown, off at the MLK, extensions and things like that. Can anybody speak to the effect that all of these new apartment construction is possibly going to have on the single family rental market?
I think Brad's probably going to have a little bit more insight than me on this, but from my angle, we're separated from it, so we don't feel a drastic impact from it. It's a pretty saturated market, it seems. There's a lot of stuff out there, and they're giving stuff away from my purview. But it hasn't affected the single-family home market in our world really at all. Maybe some of the lower-end condos, the rent for around $1,000 or $1,100. They're obviously going to be competing with places that have amenities and different things. But once you get into a 2-bed, 3-bed single family with a yard, you're just talking to a different type of person usually.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But Thomas, it's a very good question. And I think my memories, I'm getting old, but I think 2017, we saw a record number of apartments downtown, and then 18 broke that record, if I'm not mistaken. And so now I think we're still feeling that a little bit. And we, as Ben correctly identified, certainly in the higher end single family homes, you're not going to see any disruption because of that, maybe because of other market factors, as Ben identified with regard to coronavirus and things like that. But in response to the development downtown, probably not. In the more, let's say, entry-level single-family rentals to that mid-level, of that, let's say, 1,000 to 1,600, 1,700, you're going to see some impact. But there again, the folks that are looking for that single family are looking for it for a reason. They want their own four walls. They don't want somebody above them, below them, beside them. They want that yard. They want that driveway that they can park right outside the kitchen or the garage or whatever the case may be. So they're kind of looking for a different product. Now, where we've seen the big impact, though, is, for example, we have some properties that we manage in like some small multifamily, 8, 12 unit properties in like Ingersoll or maybe just south of downtown, things like that. That's been tough. And even though what they're building downtown are these fantastically expensive, over $2 a square foot, just, really breaking records with regard to the rents that they're commanding, it's arguable whether or not they're achieving them on the front end, because what they're doing is, let's say that's a 750 square foot, I don't know, 1 bed, 1 bath, that's $1,600 or whatever the case may be. What they're doing to get that rented is giving 2 or 3 months concession on that, because it doesn't show up in the rent roll. It still shows up as a $1,600 a month property when they go to refinance, or better yet, sell it. And it can show up as an advertising cost or a concession on the front end that really isn't treated the same by a prospective investor or a bank who's looking at it. And so what they're doing there is, so if you get 3 months free rent at $1,600 a month, I probably should have thought about this before I did it so I could make easier numbers, but let's see, that would be $4,800. So over the course of a year, that would be $400 per month, right? So really your effective rent rate, actually the numbers worked out all right. Your effective rent rate for that property over the course of a year, lease term, would actually be $1,200 a month, $400 less per month, as opposed to that $1,600. Well, the problem with that then is now they've created a situation where somebody who was previously looking at $1,000 to $1,200 for a prospective property can now look at this $1,600 because they can get this deal. And so now we're starting to take those people from that 1,200 and get them into this 1,600 if they manage their money right and recognize the advantage of that $1,200 effective rent. And so now the people who have the $1,200 properties are now having to go out and say, okay, well, we'll give you 2 months free rent. And that's starting to pick at the people who are looking at maybe $950 a month rentals. I'm not going to do all the math again. And so it does have a ripple or a butterfly effect that can be felt even in those $800, $900, you know, 2-bed, 2-bath apartments that are, you know, certainly nice properties, maybe in the Ingersoll area or wherever it may be, even though they're not a direct competitor with that $1,500 a month, 750 square foot, 1-bed, 1-bath, it still gets down to where it's affecting these. And so you're seeing on properties like that, you're seeing concessions, aggressive concessions being offered across the board. And things, you know, move in, free month rent, no, don't pay rent for the first 2 months, whatever the case may be. It's amazing to me on that note, we get more response if we give away a $200 TV than if we give a month's rent for free, which blows my mind. But evidently that's what the market responds to. So.
What about security deposits? How are you guys handling those, and what is your recommendation? Month's rent, 2 months rent, $500 kind of varies, or?
We deal with some owners who are, we do some placement for some apartment, some higher end properties that once you add up all of their fees, if you charge 1 or 2 months rent up front, it starts to be cost prohibitive to get into the property. So, but it's very hard for me to recommend to an owner having less than a month's rent as coverage, because you're increasing the tenant's commitment to the condition of that property. If they have $500 deposit because you wanted to grease the wheels to get them in the door on a $1,250 a month rental, as soon as they punch that first hole in that first wall in a stupid mistake or whatever, their level of commitment, if they think that you're not coming after them for a judgment after the fact or anything like that, has just really diminished down to like the $150 that's remaining on that. So their level of commitment to the continued care and their pride of residence and taking care of that unit has probably diminished with it. So from my perspective, trying to manage the interest of the property owner, it's very difficult to encourage a concession on the security deposit, because I find it plays a very important role.
That's awesome. Ben, I'll give you the last word on that, and then I know we're over time a little bit. I want to be respectful for everyone's time, so we'll do a soft close, but would love to hear your insights on that, Ben.
Yeah, I would echo what Brad's saying. Our standard is 1 month's rent no matter what when they come on board. But that's just kind of a precedent that's set up front. And if it doesn't fit, it doesn't fit what we're doing. So I would always make that recommendation to anybody. Everything that's Brad saying is exactly right. The maximum you can charge in the state of Iowa is 2 months rent. So if you have somebody with low rent or with low credit or something like that, you want to give them a shake, asking for 2 months is always a good thing. And we tend to be the type of company who wants to give the best of the worst a shot. You know, so we're not opposed to bringing up the, hey, double deposit. Yeah, you got some contingencies, but let's try a double deposit. Can you do it? And a lot of those folks, they know they're in a tough spot. They know they got a history. They know they got bad credit. And so they have a little extra cash hanging out, and they're willing to put it up and say, yeah, I'm going to be a good tenant for you. So highly recommend at least 1 month's rent. If anything, I would go a little higher on the deposit, lower on rent. And the reason I say it is with COVID-19, rent, it could get like finding good tenants. We don't know what this world's going to look like in 60 days or 90 days. So maybe tenants do get harder to find. So it might be good to get somebody locked in now with a higher deposit than it would be to capitalize on the rent necessarily. So it's totally up to you. 1 month's rent's a good standard to follow.
Agreed. And Ben, how would you recommend people get in touch with you if they'd like to?
Absolutely. So I answer my cell all day, every day. I typically try to stop around 5 o'clock as much as possible to returning calls, that is. Always make sure the voicemail is empty before the end of the day. So 515-499-4238 is that's my direct line. My email is fantastic, Ben at RPM Iowa. I'm sure it was on some of the data or the sheets that you spent out there, Mitch, and then our website. Website's fantastic. You just click on it. You're no more than 2 clicks away from where you need to get to ever. So website, email, phone, doesn't matter. I'll get a hold of you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And Brad, how would you recommend folks get in touch with you, buddy?
Same way. Brad at renterswarehouse.com is my email. My phone number here at the office is 515-528-4429. That'll get you directly to my staff, which is better than getting directly to me because they'll actually make sure I do whatever it is you want me to do. And then which one? The website, renterswarehouse.com. So.
Perfect. So those resources will be pushed out. They'll be in the show minutes for this. Guys, I really, really want to thank you for taking the time. I know we're over, so thanks for the extra time that you gave us. And we hope to have you back. And for everyone in the audience still, if you're thinking about property management, reach out to these guys, ask the questions. They're not going to make you sign a contract out of the initial call. So definitely give them a call, guys.
And guys, I one last thing I just want to recommend: make some calls out to some lenders, some commercial lenders right now, because there's some pretty good opportunity out there that I've been finding. Some folks who want to move some money if you're a well-qualified investor, and maybe get in now while people are hungry to get money lent to folks. But thanks for the opportunity, Mitch.
Goodbye. You bet, guys.
Thanks, Mitch. Appreciate it, man. Everybody who joined in, we appreciate that as well. And have a great night.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.
So next month, just real quick, next month we will do, looks like the Facebook group is asking to talk with attorneys. So we're going to get a couple attorneys on the line next month. I don't think you qualify anymore, Brad. What's that? I'm sorry?
You want me on that one too?
I mean, if you want to talk to it, buddy, sure, absolutely. I've gotten a couple guys in mind, both national and local, but all good, get as many opinions as we can. So what I'd ask from the group is if you have specific questions for the attorneys, let's start getting those to the Facebook group so I can kind of hone in. You know, it's a specialized field. So I want to get in front of everyone the right attorneys to answer the right questions. So just think into that. There'll be a poll that comes out kind of guiding those questions a little bit, but definitely reach out. Let us know who you want to hear from, and we appreciate it. So thanks, guys. Have an awesome night.
Have a good night. Thank you.